All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your time this afternoon on a Tuesday, and welcome to our workshop, Preparing Students for the World of Work, Integrating Career Skills into Your Courses. My name is Lynn Namans. I'm the Assistant Director of Learner and Career Pathways, and I'm joined here with Kristen Hernandez, who's a Senior Learning Experience Designer. The both of us work with LSU Online and Continuing Education on the design and development team. We call ourselves the D&D team. And if you're not familiar with who we are and what we do, our team collaborates with faculty to create learning experiences for online courses and programs. And we also offer faculty workshops on different aspects of course design and different things that can be added and enhanced to coursework, regardless of modality. So we do have kind of a smallish group today. So if y'all want to unmute yourselves and introduce who you are, maybe what department you're working with and what you're trying to get out of this workshop, or if, maybe some information about your courses, that's totally fine. Obviously, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat pod as well if you don't feel comfortable unmuting yourself. So would anyone like to say hi to the group?
I'll say hi. My name's Andy Nyman. I'm a professor in the School of Renewable Natural Resources. I teach our capstone class to our graduating seniors, and so I'm just hoping to steal some good ideas.
Awesome. All right, well, we'll go ahead and jump in and get started and start by taking a look at our agenda today. Feel free, if you're in the process of introducing yourself in the chat, please continue to do so. But our agenda today is going to start by setting the stage of kind of where we are in terms of the traditional student demographic and how that might be changing. We're also going to look at defining career skills and what that means, and maybe some other terminology that you have heard. We'll also look at the fastest growing skill areas, and then we'll pivot for the second half and talk about designing a skill-focused course and look at some examples and resources that, that you can use moving forward. So before we dive into the first topic, I'd like to address some housekeeping details. Kristen and I will both be facilitating this workshop today, and so each of us will be monitoring the chat pod as the other one is presenting. And so I ask that if you do post a question, make sure it's set to everyone so that we can all see your questions. We should have time for a Q&A session at the end, but if we don't get to every question, we'll certainly address them in our follow-up email. And as we go through, if you are triggered with some inspiration or you'd like to share your thoughts, obviously, please feel free to share those in the chat pod as well. Again, for those who are just joining, this session is being recorded and you will receive a link to it in the follow-up email, in addition to a PDF version of this PowerPoint. So when we look at today's student and we look at enrollment numbers, the non-traditional students are the new majority of our learners today. 75% of all college students now work at least part-time. The graphic that you see on your screen is from UPSIA's study with Thinking Cap from December 2021. And in their research, they developed 6 personas of the new learner. So today's learners include students of all ages, including, straight out of college, straight out of high school, but it also includes students of all ages. And that also includes military veterans, dislocated workers, underrepresented students, full-time workers, those with family obligations, and maybe former college students who are either coming back to finish a degree or to get an advanced degree. When we focus on the learner's motivations, we can see that they are varied, but they're all work-related. So regardless of the length of program that students are seeking, students all want to gain skills and competencies that can be used immediately in their current job, be used to elevate their work position, or to become highly employable and marketable upon completion of their chosen program Again, whether that's a bachelor's degree, associate's, a short form credential, or even a non-credit professional development experience. The students today are all very much focused on what that experience can do for them to benefit them in their careers. So by incorporating career skills into our courses and into course design, you're helping students perform effectively in your courses, as well as to develop personal qualities and competencies that will help them thrive in the work environment. So let's look at some data from students and employers regarding skills. Just over 1/3 of business leaders feel that graduates have sufficient training, meaning that employers are spending time, money, resources for new hires, new employees, and training them in areas that ideally they should have had through their education or previous experience. About a third of post-secondary students in the US believe that they will graduate with the competencies needed for career success. So there's a large group of students who don't feel that they have the knowledge or skills to compete in the workplace. About 1/4 of US workers who have attended college strongly agree that their educational experience is relevant outside of the classroom. So that leaves 75% who don't have that same feeling. And this means that there's a disconnect between coursework and the workplace. Students may not be connecting the dots between those two environments. And we'll talk more about this in a bit and how we can address this disconnect. We also know that the shelf life of technical skills is shrinking rapidly. When we look at the numbers pre and post pandemic, keeping in mind that the pandemic isn't over, the World Economic Forum estimated that 1 billion people, or about 1/3 of the global workforce, would need reskilling by 2030. And that number is now increased to 40%. So in order to receive this reskilling, this education, employees need to seek out additional learning. Now, you might be asking yourself how you can keep your courses current with the needs of the workforce, considering the shelf life of skills is shrinking. And this is something that we'll address in the second half of the workshop, so stay tuned. Historically, one's educational and professional journey remained pretty linear, and a single credential served an individual well for a stable career over their lifetime. But today's economy and society depends on ever higher levels of knowledge and the ability to rapidly evolve and adapt to changing circumstances. So students today are going to cycle between work and education throughout their career to meet those career goals. And many times they'll do those things simultaneously. Recall that 75% of all students work at least part-time. So before we start defining career skills, I want to mention that I am absolutely confident that the LSU system prepares students for the workplace. But as with everything, there's always room for improvement, right?
Right.
So in a bit, we'll look at some strategies that you can use in your courses to help students make the connection between what they're doing in their courses and how it applies to the workplace. So this time I'm going to hand it over to Kristen, and we will take a closer look at career skills.
All right, so let's jump in and talk about career skills a little bit. So we know that these are the fundamental skills that one needs to be successful in any workplace, whatever it may be. These skills are often called employability or workforce skills. And employees need these skills to succeed in their daily job responsibilities and duties that are assigned to them, to just be able to solve problems and have a good relationship with their coworkers and the customers that they have. Organizations require these skills at all levels, from those entry-level positions to those senior-level positions. And these skills can transfer from one organization to another. So it doesn't just apply to this one, Apple Corporation and then to this other organization. Is something that can be used across the board. You may have also heard these skills called hard and soft. And when we talk about hard skills, these are going to be those specific abilities that you use to succeed in your daily job. And these skills are typically measurable, they're tangible, and they're result oriented. You may hear sometimes people refer to these hard skills as technical skills. And hard skills can include and are not limited to things like analytics, computer skills, machine operation, coding, and programming. And then we have soft skills. And these are going to be those personal attributes that enable somebody to really interact effectively and harmoniously with other people. You may also hear these called personal or enduring skills, and they're considered soft because they may seem to be a little bit difficult to measure objectively. And these soft skills can include a range of cognitive, social, and emotional skills, such as the ability to be creative, the ability to be, think critically, interpret information, make decisions, and just to be able to communicate, may it be written or verbal. You might also consider traits such as like resilience and empathy towards others and emotional intelligence. Though by treating these traits as skills, we emphasize that they can be learned. And some soft skills, we're including a list here, and we're not limiting just to this list, but things like collaboration, because we know that is very important, not only in a course, but also as we go out into the workforce. Critical thinking, diversity, equity, and inclusion, leadership, problem solving, time management. All of these skills are very important. You may find that more of the hard skills are going to be in the engineering, math, and science courses, and soft skills maybe more in the liberal arts courses. But both hard and soft skills are applicable across all disciplines. So NACE, which is the National Association of Colleges and Employers, they put out a job outlook survey for students and employers. And what was very interesting about this is it shows that the perceived proficiency of some skills is vastly different. So when they asked graduating seniors in this 2022 survey, they cited communication, critical thinking, and teamwork as the most important competencies that a job candidate must have in order to be considered job ready to go into the field. And in a separate study, employers put the same 3 readiness competencies at the top of their list. So that's really great. They're on the same page there. However, and the students and the employers ranked the proficiencies of these competencies very differently. And as you can see on the screen, employers ranked graduates highest in technology, while graduates listed that skill towards the bottom of their list. Instead, the students felt that their highest proficiency going in was teamwork. And employers actually said they ranked that third. And second, the students said second on their list is professionalism. They felt like they were good at that. And the employers ranked that as 6. So what does this even mean? It means that there is a very different perception of proficiency across employers and graduates. And what can we do to try to start thinking about this and really growing in all of these different areas? And one thing you can do is use your connections within the industry and hear directly from them what they are seeing as those strengths of employers in entering the workforce, and where are those opportunities for growth in employees. And use that information that you get from the industry leaders to support your students in these competencies in your courses.
Another really interesting trend that is just part of our daily lives now is the rise of automation in the workplace. So skills that are easily automated are not as in demand. Things like repeating tasks, memorization, quantitative skills. Calculators and computers do quantitative skills quite well. According to the World Economic Forum's 2020 Future of Jobs report, by 2025, 85 million jobs are estimated to be displaced by automation. Sounds daunting,
Yes.
but at the same time, huge growth is expected in those more technical digital roles, things like cloud computing and big data. So let's take a closer look at some of the fastest growing digital or technical areas. Again, organizations like the World Economic Forum, the Education Design Lab, Cengage, Coursera, there's a lot of organizations doing research on the future of jobs and what skills will be needed now and in the near future. So the list you see on the screen is a few of the top growing digital or technical areas in no particular order. So product-led growth is being driven by a competitive and mature market for business software and the end user experience. You know, as customers, we all want the tools and products and services that we use to be polished experiences. And so there's a trend that is integrating user experience design into messaging, into product design, and looking at different personas and various use cases in that kind of business strategy, which is beginning to displace marketing, kind of the traditional business strategy that's been the leader since the for many years. So that product-led growth and user-focused strategy is expanding. Another area is managing and visualizing data. It's becoming a business-wide skill requirement. We saw on the previous slide that quantitative skills are not going to be as in demand. However, the ability to evaluate and assess data is very much still needed. According to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, data scientists are going to have a 36% growth between 2021 and 2031. And as our digital transformation leads to increased volumes of data, it's becoming more important for businesses to focus on how that information is shared, presented, analyzed, and secured. Gartner predicts that data storytelling will become the most widespread means of consuming business intelligence by 2025. So data science, data analytics, and data literacy, these are all going to be high demand roles. But remember that the ability to interpret and analyze data is needed in all industries and across all disciplines. The list now that you see on the screen here is a list of areas of growth for those more soft human skills. These we're calling enduring because employees will need them kind of regardless of their job role. Again, these are non-technical, but no less valuable or easier to learn than those kind of hard technical skills. You'll see here that storytelling is listed, which complements the data science from the previous slide, right? So taking a bunch of data, evaluating it and analyzing it and turning it into visualizations or stories to communicate a message about a product, a service, or an experience, that's where a strong liberal arts background will be very beneficial. In fact, a strong liberal arts background will help in all of the areas that you see here. And these roles, again, can be found across industries, even in more, technical industries. You're still going to have planning and decision-making and people development. These all use collaboration, communication, and those other skills that we mentioned earlier. So we want to emphasize that both types of skills are important and complementary to each other. Certain professions require very specific technical skills because without them, you pretty much fail instantly. For example, if I'm hired as a programmer, but I don't know how to write code for the thing that they want, I'm not going to have a job for very long. But even then, soft skills can help me develop and use those hard skills successfully. So I can use my communication skills and reach out to peers for assistance. I can have, the persistence to find a solution and kind of evaluate a path forward. All of these things will help close the gap if an employee is lacking in a technical area. So in other words, the ability to master the technical aspects of a job can only take an employee so far. So having soft skills is absolutely essential. And it's why there will always need to be a balance between the hard disciplines and the liberal arts. So why is this important in higher education? And what can we do to provide these skills to our students to help them prepare for the future? In other words, what does it mean for you? So faculty can show students the career possibilities associated with their majors and with their courses by using real-time job posts or real-life alumni profiles. This is something that can be done early in a degree program, but really should be added throughout to link real-world examples and your experience in the industry. And it's a great way to introduce students to various career paths they can take. Again, it's a way for students to connect the dots between what they learn in your course and why and how it's relevant and applicable in the workplace. It also means giving students more opportunities to showcase their skills through work products or portfolios. Someone on this call is developing capstone, so that's an excellent case where maybe building a portfolio at the end of their program might come in handy, but that could be built upon throughout their educational journey, right? So you could provide practice opportunities for students, give them assignments that require them to think beyond the textbook and apply their knowledge. And again, encourage students to keep their work products, their artifacts, to use either in an e-portfolio or just to be able to recall in a job interview to kind of demonstrate what they know and how they've done that. It also means that faculty will need to intentionally add these skills and design assignments to help students translate skills from the language of higher education into the language of the job market. Remember a couple slides ago, we looked at the difference in how new graduates and employees ranked proficiency across the 8 competencies and how students don't feel like their educational experience is relevant outside of the classroom. So employees might be having a hard time finding that talent, but it's not because the skills aren't there. It's not because students don't have those competencies. It might be because they don't know how to communicate that. And so it's difficult for those employees to identify those skills on resumes or even in interviews. So we want to ensure that students can communicate their skills to employers. So at this point, we're going to pause for a minute. We're going to ask you to think about 1 or 2 of your courses. Think about what types of skills your students gain through completing your course. And do you think students are able to verbalize those skills and apply them, when they are looking for a job or to put that on their resume? So we're going to give you, about a minute or so to kind of think through that, and then we'll open it up for some discussion. But while you're doing that reflective activity, Krista and I are actually going to swap screen sharing. So if Zoom blips out on you, it's us, it's not you, okay? All right, so if anyone would like to share a little bit about their course and maybe the skills that you concentrate on in your courses, feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat and either share your thoughts, or if you have a question up to this point, feel free to ask that as well. All right. So we will have a, oh, someone showed their video. Does that mean you have something to share?
Yeah, in order to keep the silence from continuing, I'll go ahead and share a little bit. I think we have it easier in my department because our students generally go into environmental work with either state or federal government or the private sector. And so I think we do a pretty good job in most of our classes of talking about these skills that we use on the job. However, by the time they get to our capstone class, um, I think it's important that we focus on critical thinking and integrative thinking. And in fact, I have them write essays. And this semester, I think two of the students wrote that they had good introduction to critical thinking in high school, but freshman and sophomore years in college beat that out of them. And they only got back to it again as juniors and seniors. And those types of, those classical liberal arts types of education are really valuable to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a good point of, the skills that our students are coming into higher ed with may not, there may be a lot of growth that needs to happen there, or like you said, they may lose some of that just because of the focus potentially on other areas. So yeah.
Yeah, just a lot of there's a lot of facts to memorize and learn as freshmen and
Sure.
sophomores. They don't start putting it together and judging the relevance until juniors and seniors, is the way I paraphrase their comments to me.
Yeah.
So
Would anyone else like to share?
about my class? So I teach several classes, and one of the things I noticed a couple of years ago with my interaction with students is just the lack of just communication skills. So I mean, not technical communication skills, but more like just business skills, I guess. So this semester I'm teaching an introduction to engineering class for the undecided engineering students, and I decided to get ahead of some of the issues that they're going to have later on. And one of the assignments is we talk about ethics and engineering ethics. And so the way we integrated some life skills, if you will, or career skills into that assignment is to make it a team discussion. And to do that, they have to schedule a meeting. So, I talk about or coach them on how to conduct a proper meeting, that sort of thing. But then I let them do it on their own, and they have to do very simple things like find a time when all of them could be available. So using a polling tool like Doodle Poll or something, so they can all agree on a time, documenting their minutes, coming up with action items, and coming up with a responsibility matrix. Some of these skills that are going to help them in their jobs, but they're forced to do them in this meeting and come back and do a presentation as a team. So it's an ethics discussion assignment, but at the end of the day, they're having to jump through all these hoops that I put in there that force them to learn this little career skills in terms of how, just simple things like sending sending a calendar invite. I don't know how many times I've struggled with students setting up meetings because they don't know how to do that. So this is forcing them to go through that process, and not just sending an email, hey, we'll meet on Tuesday, but actually sending the email, sending a proper calendar invite that's going to be on my calendar and everybody's calendar and so forth. So I don't know if they can verbalize those skills when they come up, but they'll be able to not struggle when they're faced with those challenges.
Yeah, perfect. I love that. I love the responsibility matrix. I'd love to see that actually. Because when you think about our our society now today, everybody uses, emojis and text, and it's such short form. Like it's asking someone to sit down and write like a business email or a memo or something. Unless you're taught how to do that and given opportunities to practice that, you might not know how to send an official formal email to your boss or something like that. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting to, you know, the things that we assume that people know how to do is something kind of eye-opening. I dropped my car off at the shop this morning, and I was having a conversation with the guy at the desk, and they have a newer employee, and we started talking about workforce type stuff and skills, and he was telling me that the struggle they're having is with the new employees not being able to communicate with customers. And so they're having to do a lot of on-job training to get them just to open up and approach a customer and say, "Hi, how are you doing? How can I help you?" And to appropriately take their order that they need. And so that was something I was like, we assume people can communicate, but how, they may think they can, but others perceive that differently.
All right, thank you guys for sharing. Feel free to
Perfect.
continue to share throughout the rest of this session in the chat pod. And again, we'll have some time at the end to open it back up for discussion.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. So we've talked about different hard and soft skills. So how can we add these skills into our courses? And in just a moment, I'm going to show you some examples, but first, let's take a moment to talk about translating these outcomes into skills. One strategy that you can use to unbundle, or one strategy you can use in your courses is to unbundle your course outcomes into smaller skill statements. And what you see on the screen here is 2 course outcomes from Construction Management 4223, which is a course that's on strategic planning and construction. And when we think about these particular outcomes, how can we unbundle them to their component parts? What does the concepts, principles, and practices really mean in the construction industry? Does it look any different than strategic planning in business or any other industry? And what are the skills needed to do strategic planning for all levels of an organization? And when we think about these course outcomes in terms of skills, we can see that students need to be able to identify market opportunities to strategically expand and enter the new markets, identify goals, set priorities, and balance resources in order to execute strategies, determine success metrics to evaluate if implemented strategies meet the success criteria, and apply critical thinking to monitor and manage internal and external risk. Notice that these skill statements are not limited to the construction industry. And as we discussed earlier, skills can expand beyond a single discipline or industry. And adding skill statements to your course provides students with that clear picture of the skills they're going to gain in your course and give them that language they need to be able to communicate this to employers. The next step in this process is to intentionally design your assignments that have your students doing these things. Perhaps maybe you have your students create, say, a strategic plan that balances scope, time, and resources. And this project can be broken down into several deliverables. Doesn't have to be one. So breaking it down into smaller bits. So what you're going to see on this screen is the first milestone of a project where students are completing a SWOT analysis. The assignment instructions include a purpose statement that shows the students how this assignment is going to relate to the workforce and the skills they've been working on throughout the course. And when designing your assignments, consider having your students do some of that industry-specific research. If we are trying to incorporate relevant and those timely career skills in our courses, because we talked about shelf life, we we don't want to have to take a whole lot of time to update the links and materials each term. So ask your students to bring back to the class any current examples that they find, case studies in the industry, news articles, anything like that that they can bring to discuss as a group, debate on issues, and just share information that they find that is relevant in the moment. And as you evaluate student performance, Think about creating your rubrics so that they are skill-based. Continuously relating assignments and activities to the course outcome is going to allow your students to really connect the purpose, which in turn is going to help them to articulate their skill development to employers and just have a better understanding of what it is and what is expected of them. And as you know, our students come to our courses with a range of knowledge and experiences. You may have first-time students that said, hey, this is what I want to go into. I have a very little bit of knowledge, to students who are entering that have been in the workforce for many years. So you have a wide variety of knowledge and experience that comes into your course each time it's offered. And another strategy that you could potentially use is to help your students develop their skills is to add supplemental or what we call optional side quests to your courses. And for example, that could be, let's say that in your course, you require students to create a presentation. You want to offer some type of practice opportunities and resources that are going to allow them to build up their speaking skills. And as I mentioned about that conversation this morning when I dropped my car off, and that lack of just being able to communicate, this is something that we want to make sure that we're building those pieces in, so students are continuously being able to practice those skills. And the image that you see on the screen shows a snapshot of a free tool, and we all like free. And it's offered through PowerPoint Online, and it's called Speaker Coach. It uses artificial intelligence to report things like pacing, the use of filler words, tone, and pitch. And it is a great resource that it allows your students to practice their presentation skills as many times as they need to until they feel comfortable or that score continues to increase for them to show that they are making progress. And not only does it give them the data as to where they're at each area, it also provides them feedback on how they can improve those skills. And this is a tool that's not only just great for students, but for ourselves as well. When we think about presenting in front of people, or may it be face-to-face or through a Zoom meeting. You can also add in components that are related to the skills in your course for students to really take a deeper dive into it. And on the screen, you'll see some examples that you can use or customize for your students. And adding in some information and activities for students to practice and hone their soft and hard skills is going to really allow them to self-identify their own gaps in those skills and take that proactive approach versus reactive in addressing these particular areas that maybe they are not so good at. I want to talk through some examples because we can tell you information, but we want to show you some things and not only show you, but give you some stuff that you can use. But before we jump in to look at some different examples, I do want to pause for a moment to see if anybody has any questions. And you can unmute yourself or type in the chat, and I'll Lynn, if you could let me know if anybody has anything, we'll address that as well.
Nothing in the
Nothing
chat
on?
at
Okay,
this point.
perfect.
Yeah.
Everybody is ready to jump in and see some examples. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you into a self-enrollable. So yes, you can get into this. It's an example course, and Lynn is going to provide that link to you in the chat. So you can jump in there and start taking a look as I'm going through. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time in here because I want you to have, be able to explore on your own. But I do want to kind of mention a few things on this particular page. And all the things that are in this particular course, we'll talk to you, shortly about how you can get further access instead of just reading and looking at what's on the screen. One thing that we do with LSU online courses, excuse me, but pull that back up, is that we have a standard, and that standard is to always connect activities and assessments to the the course outcomes and the learning goals. And this is also going to go for any additional materials or activities that help students improve their workforce skills. So what we do is we recommend that there is some type of instructional language information in a course to let students know what are the career skills gained that they're going to get from this course, and how are those things going to be provided to them. And it could be a simple statement, on the front page of the course or in the syllabus. But also you can even, put even more information in your syllabus to provide data to the students. Give them links to additional information where they can discover themselves those much needed workforce skills. And on this particular page that you see, this course has broken down the specific workforce skills that are needed. And there are links to learn more about that. For instance, psychology, there's a link to the workforce skills that are needed and what they can do to improve in those skills, but also what can they do in the psychology field. So those are some things that are very helpful. But we also have some really good, as I mentioned earlier, quests. And those are career skill pages that have been created for different soft skills or hard skills. And what's really great about this particular site is it's always growing. We're continuously adding things. And then what you see in here, don't feel like, oh, well, they mentioned this particular subject area. It can be edited to your needs very simply. But the one I want to kind of point out is one that we all probably struggle with, which is time management. And your students probably struggle with time management. And what you're going to find in these particular examples throughout this course is going to be a mixture of different things. So you're going to find there might be some journal articles, there may be some videos that they have to watch, there may be different interactive pieces that will show up in the course. And those things are different things that they're going to be able to explore as many times as they need to. I wanted to be able to show this to you, but let's see if I can. I think I have too many screens open right now. Let's see if we can try that again. But you may have, if you're in it right now, you could probably see these things if it's not going to open up at this time. But there's lots of great information that I recommend that you take a look at. And something else that, there, it did come up there. There we go. So there's different activities here. And one that I really want to point out to you is this time management action plan. And this is something that you could put in your class at the beginning to get students to really think about how to manage their time in your class. What needs to be done, looking at the syllabus, looking at the expectations and planning that out and having an exportable plan for themselves that they can follow throughout your course. So it's going to help them as they go through your course, but also they're learning those time management skills that are going to help them when they go out into the workforce. And then another thing that I do want to point out too on here is linking to the Olin Career Services, which has a plethora of information that is beneficial to students. And this could be something that you add to your course and that students can then explore themselves and find out, where can they go to get virtual career support? How can they grow in, R&R? That's what they want to do. And they want to see where they can go with that. And so there's a lot of resources available to them with the Olin Career Center. So definitely something we recommend adding to your courses. That was like a little preview of that, but we recommend that you self-enroll into the course. There is more than just career skills, so you can explore at your leisure on those types of things. Individuals find learning opportunities for their skill and career growth everywhere nowadays. It's hard not to find something, when For every like one video you find, there's 20 more just like it. And many business leaders today, they are rejecting the notion that aptitude is tied strictly to a college degree. And instead, they're looking at total years of experience and that breadth and depth of skills. These leaders include Apple and Google and Bank of America, Starbucks, Chick-fil-A. I could go on with these different leaders or companies. And higher education institutions must prepare students for successful job outcomes by really prioritizing in-demand and human skills, job-based learning, and hands-on projects. Learning that's going to really grow the whole student. So how can we begin focusing our curriculum and courses on skills? Well, we want to first ask your network and industry partners what skills they are looking for. Once you know what your specific field is looking for, think about ways you can help students gain those skills and competencies. And then next, start small. This isn't something that you can just snap your fingers is done or build overnight. And the thing is, you're probably already doing some of this. If you really step back and think about it, you're doing these things. And how can we call that out more to students? How can we give them that little extra to help them practice on their own? And the key pieces are to establish the skills that you want to focus on in your course. Build in opportunities that allow your students to demonstrate their proficiency, practice those skills, and make those skills transparent to students so they know how to convey that knowledge and experience to potential and current employers. Build activities and provide materials for students to practice these particular skills. As you saw in the examples course, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I know you don't have all the time in the world to create everything from scratch. So you can use sites like you just saw and take those things and adapt them to your needs. You can also find really good, great open educational resources, and many which of those you can remix or customize however you would like. And then you want to assess. Use authentic assessments to allow students to really demonstrate and utilize the LSU resources. The Olin Career Services is important. And when we think about authentic assessments, these are those things that allow students to really demonstrate their proficiency. Maybe open-ended questions on an exam where students must apply what they've learned. Ask them to work in groups to produce a deliverable. Have them create a presentation. And then finally, and of course, last, but not least, communicate with your students. Share your own experience. You are the subject matter expert. They are there to get that knowledge that you have, that experience. Share that with them and encourage your students to build a portfolio they can use to show potential employers and articulate their skills. Maybe you don't have them doing a particular assignment where they're building a portfolio, but talk to them about saving things that they're developing in their courses because they can build their own portfolio outside of your class. So these are some things, just talk to them and communicate these things and let them know why it's important and how these things have helped you as you have gone through your career as well.
So we hope that we have sparked some ideas that you can use in your courses, and hopefully the creativity is swimming. You're being inspired, especially as you kind of look through that examples and resources course. But as you begin planning your next steps, we want to share some resources with you. First, LSU Online offers an in-residence program with the Faculty Technology Center. I'm going to put the link into the chat to the page. So if you're interested, you can kind of bookmark that. So each college has a dedicated designer from our team to help instructors with course design questions, regardless of modality. So if you're purely on a campus course, or even if you're not tied to a college, but maybe you're a staff member who's working on some type of team training, we can talk through those design discussions with you. So we encourage you to schedule an appointment with us if you'd like to talk about your specific needs and how you can begin integrating these career skills. We also, with the FTC in residence, there's a dedicated FTC consultant for each college, but of course you can contact the FTC regardless of time, and they have some, I believe they have some walk-in hours as well. So for those more technical, how do I physically use Moodle and put this in Moodle questions, the FTC, the Faculty Technology Center, is going to be your go-to person. Now, Kristen shared some resources from the Olin Career Center a few minutes ago, but those are all student facing. And so those were resources really for your students. But the Career Center also offers some faculty resources, which we're going to share with you. The Career Assignment Menu is a resource that they have developed for faculty who are interested in incorporating career skills into their curriculum. Some of the suggestions are assignments that faculty can implement on their own, while others are ways the Career Center could lead an activity around a specific career development topic. So the Career Center team is adept at collaborating with faculty to design these types of assessments or a presentation that fits your needs. The Career Champions program is the Career Center's professional development program for faculty and staff surrounding career development conversations. It provides a setting for participants to have a deeper dive into the conversations that the Career Center is having with students to build confidence in their abilities. So that's an awesome opportunity for you to kind of broaden your conversation around skill development and career development as well. And finally, we'd like to share our faculty resources and support website, where you can find a lot of information on course design, authentic assessments, even designing capstone courses, student engagement in online courses, and many, many other more topics, in addition to trainings and recorded trainings that we've had. So at this point, we're going to pause and open the floor for further discussions. If you'd like to share anything or ask any questions, we're here to answer them. Again, before I kind of let you loose on the mute button, just a reminder that you will receive a link to the recording of this session, in addition to a PDF version of the PowerPoint. So thank you for your time and attention. At this point, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask any questions or share any thoughts that you have. And if I know this was scheduled to 2:30, but if you need to jump off, that's fine too. All right, doesn't look like we have anyone. Kristen, you want to go ahead and stop sharing? Perfect, thank you so much.